Hei alle sammen. Hello everybody. Welcome to tonight's event in Penn, Norway. My name is Agnete Haaland, and I'm going to just say a few words as an introduction. First, I want to tell you that this is the second last program of an event in our celebration of ourselves. Norwegian Penn is now 100 years old, and we intend to keep going at least another 100 years. So tomorrow is the final event, and that will take place at Kulturhuset at Youngstorget. You're so welcome to come and join us if you want to. It starts at 7 o'clock in the evening, and it's Shabana Rehman who's going to receive the Ossietzky Prize. So if you want to come tomorrow as well, please be welcome at the Kulturhuset på Youngstorget. Now we're going to talk about the women's resistance in Turkey. And the woman who's going to lead us through this one hour event is Caroline Stockford, who is Penn Norway's Turkey advisor, and is also a translator of Turkish poetry and literature into English and Welsh. And she has also actually, I'm going to show you this book. She is responsible for this book also, where she has translated and edited poems of Ilham Schumacher, who is one of the honorary members of Penn Norway. So this session will last for 1 hour. At the end of the session, we will open for questions from you if you have any questions. So you will be given the chance to ask questions at the end. And with those words, I welcome you all, my heart, and Caroline Stockford. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. It's very nice to have such a good audience here this evening. We're going to begin the event with the empty chair, and then I will introduce the panel and tell you a little bit of what we'll be talking about. So the empty chair is always used at Penn events for a member of our global writers family who can't be with us. Usually we have a big photograph and a piece of card with their face on, but it's quite short notice. This person was recently arrested and we haven't been able to do it yet. So tonight we're remembering Şebnem Korur Fincancı, who is a very important woman in Turkey. She's a very important human rights activist. She's the director of the Medical Association of Turkey, so she's the chief physician. She's a forensic scientist. She's a board member of the Human Rights Foundation. She's one of the real stalwarts of the fight for human rights in Turkey. And she's now in jail, and it happened so quickly. It was, I would say, a setup in that she was asked her opinion, her medical opinion, a professional opinion, as to whether chemical gas might have been used by the Turkish state in northern Iraq. She said, I don't know, I would need to do post-mortems to determine this, but I would recommend that we have an investigation. And just for recommending an investigation, that is, she's been accused of disseminating terrorist propaganda, by suggesting that it should even be investigated. She was immediately arrested and is in Bakırköy prison at the moment. So our thoughts are with Şebnem, and if you'd like to read a bit more about that, then we also have an interview we did with her last year, which is on our website, Norsk Penn, and if you go to English, then you'll be able to read all of our work. This evening we have a fabulous panel. We're really happy to have such great guests from Turkey and from Norway and Vienna. First of all, I will set the scene a tiny bit about Penn Norway's work in Turkey, just in case there's anybody who's not, up to date with recent events in the country. Penn Norway is a freedom of expression organisation. We defend linguistic rights, which would mean Kurdish in Turkey, the Turkish Kurdish language. We defend writers in prison, writers at risk, and we make statements. So our work really, Ceren, just on the end of the panel here, is my colleague with whom we work very closely on Turkey. We monitor the situation every day, so we're following the news every day. We react with statements with all our other Penn centres and global NGOs. We have global advocacy, so we go to Turkey and we talk to the government. We go to Europe and we talk to governments and we talk to the European Union. We have events last week in Amsterdam at the Law Hub. We set up big projects, so we research indictments of writers, and we've had two big, huge reports come out in the last 2 years based on trial monitoring. So we like to go to Turkey. Our way of working is not to say that we know best, but we go and monitor. We make recommendations based on Turkey's own laws, constitution, and European Convention. So we're a sort of a watchdog, I think you could say. We work with a lot of women, and I think one of the reasons this event has come about, it's not a deliberately feminist event, it's just that the people who are working hardest, in a way, to protect human rights in Turkey are women at the moment. We work with a lot of women lawyers, journalists and human rights defenders, and therefore we've decided to do an event on women resisting in Turkey. So I'll move on now to introduce our panel. With us this evening we have Ayşe Düzkan to my left. Ayşe is one of the pioneers of feminism in Turkey, a founder of the movement. She's an author and journalist. She's been jailed over freedom of expression and freedom of the media issues herself. She was guest editing a Kurdish newspaper and was jailed for 1 year, 6 months, or had a sentence for that long. She was involved in the peace struggle in Turkey with the Women's International League for Peace, and she writes for several news outlets in Turkey, including a monthly column in Yeni Yaşam and also writes for sendika.org. We have Sidsel Wold, who many of you will probably know, who's a journalist and non-fiction writer working for both radio and television as a presenter. And the past 5 years she's been NRK's Istanbul correspondent, so she's very familiar with Turkey. She's also a recipient of prizes for her work, including the Ossietzky Prize awarded by PEN Norway. And then we have Ceren Uysal on the end. She's a human rights lawyer from Istanbul. She's been on the board of the Progressive Lawyers Association since 2015, actively working in the LGBTQI+ committee. In 2016, she was awarded the Dr. George Leipzig Prize for Freedom of Speech. And she's currently writing a thesis in Vienna on intersectionalist feminist journalism. And she works for PEN Norway as our legal advisor on Turkey. So welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to have you here. So let's jump in. We've got a lot to talk about because there's an awful lot's been happening and always happens in Turkey. But I'd like to start with Sidsel, if I may, just to, as it's a Norwegian audience, how did you, as a Norwegian woman, how did you find living in Istanbul, and how did you find sort of women's presence, women's life, and their role in journalism, etc.?
I found that, Turkey is very different from all other countries I've been working in because of the conditions for journalism, especially for Turkish colleagues. And I found that, women more on the secular side are very, very brave. Sometimes I even think of the Iranian women now. I've seen the same bravery in Turkey. Especially when Turkey, President Erdogan pulled Turkey out of the Istanbul Convention, which is a convention to protect women against domestic violence, especially. And then the women were demonstrating everywhere, and they were so brave. And the police came with the tear gas, and were beating some of them, and they continued and continued and continued. And also the 8th of March, every 8th of March, they were also out in Istiklal, and they were everywhere, also on the Asian side, and they were very brave. And every year, the police were chasing them away, every year. But the bravery and the presence of women is very little seen in political life. You don't have many female politicians except Meral Akşener in the E-Party. I think she's about the only one. And Emin Erdogan, the wife of Erdogan, she never says anything, hardly. She's just following her husband. With a whale, and she's not really a role model, I think, for a modern Turkey. That's what I think. So women who are also, just want to mention one more thing, the women who are talking up against all the femicides, the killing of so many young women. Every day, I think, between 1 and 2 Kurdish women are killed by their ex-boyfriends, ex-husbands, or other people in the family. And this is a huge issue, something I was thinking about all the time. And those women who were standing up for them, I really admire. So these are the issues that I think were the most important for me.
Yeah. You've covered quite a lot of ground there. I mean, you know, we've mentioned a lot of different really important things. We should unpack a little bit more, perhaps, with Ceren and with Ayşe. So let's start with, say, the Women's March, for example, Ayşe. I mean, on the 8th of March, it's International Women's Day, and I was there in 2018, and the police kettled in. They kept women waiting in the whole of Istiklal Street, where the bomb went off yesterday, kept them waiting there for 5 hours, and then eventually kettled them in, and then there was tear gas and rubber bullets. So they closed them in. So there's an awful lot of violence, just the state present. Are they afraid of women? And what is the wonderful spirit that you can feel there there's a jubilant spirit amongst the protesters?
The most interesting thing is that the police pushes the woman, but the woman push the police also. You know, it is like these iron barriers we see all around the world, and the police puts them there, and the women just break them, you know, towards the police and just run over them. So this is something men, you know, all these macho, brave, revolutionary men, they can't do that. So this is a difference. Why is that? Because what Erdogan wants to do is affecting our everyday life. It's not about politics, it's about the way we live. And the second wave of feminism, I'm not the founder, I'm one of the founders. It was really a collective work. And it happened during the 80s, after the coup d'etat. There was a very violent coup d'etat. You might probably heard about that. And there was a first wave of feminism in Turkey. I don't know that. I will be talking about the second wave, which I have witnessed and lived through. It was strong, it was growing strong, but after Erdogan, after AKP, it was become stronger, because there's a tension between the needs and demands of the women's movement, more freedom, more liberation, more choosing the way we will live. There's a tension between these demands and the policies of AKP. They want women inside. He was at first he was sort of a partner of Ihwan Muslim. They are religious. That's another thing. You can be religious, but you don't have to be organized. They are right wing. We have seen other right wing politics in Turkey, but this is different. And so it is this thing that women have to be at home, and I mean, it is, if you are not poor, you won't work. I mean, if you're poor, but this is something they advise to the poor classes, to the working class. Their children, the children and Erdogan's daughters, they have high education, very good education, they're working, and all these, there are so many journalists and commenters on TV, very supporting AKP. They're women and they have children and they're always on TV and working, and they're not like the housewives that Erdogan advises women to be. So there's also a small class thing there, I think. And on the other hand, I want to just say something about what you said. There's HDP. HDP is the first party. It is a left-wing party formed basically by the Kurdish liberation movement. But there are Turks there, and there are Turkish left-wing groups there. They are the first party, I think, with this co-presidency system. So, which means that at every point in the party, I'm not a member of it. I'm just a voter. I vote for them. But they have a woman and a man. There are two presidents of the party. In every village, in every town, the party has two people, presidents. One is male, one is female. So I think this is a big change. So Pervin Buldan is now one of the co-chairpersons. It's not the president, it's not the right word, so forgive my broken English. And she was a housewife when her husband was killed by state forces, they say, during the 90s. And she was pregnant then, and she gave birth at that date when she heard that her husband was killed, disappeared. And she was a real housewife. Now she's the chairwoman of the party. The movement made a very good speaker a very good chairwoman out of a housewife. I think that is a very great thing to do. That's very difficult, and that's a very great thing. So I would also like to comment about that, not only Erdogan, and I think that is all I can say for now. Is that okay?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask next, really, what pressures do you think women in Turkey feel from the state? Because, you know, we can talk in a moment about the Gezi Park protests, which I'll explain a little bit. I remember seeing two things. One was Diyanet, which is the religious sort of body in Turkey who's in charge of religious affairs. And I heard that one of their chief spokespeople had said, it is your holy right to kill your wife. So that claiming that, you know, that you have a... I remember reading that in the papers. It's anecdotal. But and the other is that Erdogan was telling women not to laugh in the street. Pregnant women should not laugh in the street and such things. Was it somebody else?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. A leader of a Islamic sect.
Okay, a leader of Islamic sect. So I think when the Gezi protests began in Turkey, there'd been an awful lot of social pressure. Would you agree, Ceren, that when you know, women were being told what to do, that Erdogan was trying to control every area of people's lives?
I really like how you put the question, because mostly when we're joining some events recently, people are always asking questions concerning the period after the state of emergency. But you're asking a question which is before it, and I think quite significant. And yes, because it is true that the Gezi protest started to protect the Gezi Park and the tree and the nature, which means it was an ecological movement against urban transformation, etc. But what made it different than the other social movements in Turkey was the feeling that you will lose everything, every single freedom you have in that country as a woman, as a LGBTQ+, as, I don't know, everybody felt it. It was very difficult for us to use our right to demonstrate. It was very difficult to use your right to speak, to write, without being the target. And then one night, you see that young people who were just sleeping there, you know, in the park, to protect the park, in a very peaceful way, without any weapons, without anything, just sleeping. And then you watch it online that they are beaten by the police. And then you feel that, yes, I don't want to know that this will be the future. So people start to join the demonstrations, and many different people. But if you will talk about the woman movement and the relationship of this movement with Gezi, I would like to talk about something else. You know, this demonstration, like we were together with many different group of people. Like can you believe that the football fans, they were there, and of course they were using the worst language that you can imagine. We were fighting together, but they were using the most sexist language that you can imagine. And you just want to fight with that guy, but there was the police barricade. You didn't have the chance. But the woman movement found that moment. And they started to erase all the slogans that were written by these hooligans to the walls, which were targeting Erdogan by targeting my mother, or like Erdogan's mother, or the other way around. And then they started to erase them. And they started to teach them. They started to take the microphones and megaphones and tell them, hey, this is not the way of resistance. You cannot use this language. You cannot say that. You will learn, you will learn, you will learn. I cannot say that they learned it at all, but at least during the demonstrations, they were careful. They learned to resist together with LGBTQ before the police barricades. This was a moment, this was an historical moment for Turkey. Maybe you will think that I am quite naive, but I still believe that that period changed a lot. And this is, you know, we will come this, I think, later, but this is one reason we should keep in mind, because, you know, like, you will see that we are hopeful still. Like, I am hopeful, at least, not because of the elections or this or that, but I know that there is a potential in my country because of many other reasons, but one of those reasons should be mentioned as Gezi.
Yeah, yeah. I'll come on to Ayşe in a moment to ask you about your Özgür Gündem, your time in prison for over freedom of a violation of your right to freedom of expression. But just to explain a bit about PEN Norway's work with Gezi, the Gezi Park. So we're bringing out a booklet in a couple of weeks about Gezi. So Gezi means strolling. To gezmek is to go and stroll and have a wander. So the Gezi Park is a small park in the middle of Istanbul, Taksim Square, where people could take lunch or go for a short walk. And as Ceren said, there was protest. They were protesting this road going through and a shopping centre being built. And it erupted into 3 million people protesting across the whole country. But what happened afterwards? There was a court case in which Mücella Yapıcı, one of the lead figures, who was an architect, she was acquitted along with her co-defendants. But suddenly, it seems that perhaps Erdogan the government found Gezi very threatening because, as Ceren said, there were people from all walks of life, all ages, all beliefs, all came together. They'll be there, there's pictures of men of all ages hiding all together behind a wall, and everyone opened their homes to the protesters. So it threatened the government that this is a power that could spring up. So what happened next is that suddenly new charges were brought in 2016, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's nearly 6 years, against Osman Kavala, who's the head of an arts foundation. He's a businessman. His office is near Gezi Park. And then there were 16 defendants. So there were lawyers, architects, human rights defenders. It's like they pulled the names out of a hat in a way of people who could have been there. And they started this ginormous, huge court case against them with an indictment, which is the foundation of the case, which was 657 pages long. And they wanted thousands of years in prison for these people. They were blaming them for every single broken window across the country. They just said, you all organised this with money from abroad and you all are responsible for the criminal damage. The case went on for 5 years. Osman Kavala is still in prison. He was in prison the whole time. So what's been done in Turkey with this regime, and we'll talk to Ceren later about women lawyers, the rule of law has been trampled and ignored, and there is no independence of the judiciary. The judges and prosecutors are chosen by a panel that is chosen by the president. So, it's just his will being done. So as PEN Norway, we studied the indictment. We actually started a whole project based on that one indictment, because I said as a non-lawyer, if a judge accepts this booklet and runs a case on it for 5 years, if this is flawed, the case should be dropped. So we then got lawyers from around the world to study 22 different indictments in journalist cases and compared them to Turkish domestic law and international law and the European Convention right for a fair trial, and unfortunately not one of them matched. But this was a very effective project for PEN because we as human rights defenders and literary people joined forces with the science of the law, and as soon as our project's reports were coming out, we were called in to speak to the government at the embassy, and they didn't like our project. But the end result was that they slightly changed the law and the right to a fair trial concerning indictments. So I explain all that so that you can sort of see what we did. As PEN Norway, we went out there to Kjersti, came with me in 2018. Agnete's been as well. We've been to about I think more than 20 of the hearings over 5 years in person to show solidarity in a courtroom that seats 800 people. And it's really frightening. It's frightening but very upsetting to be part of that theatre and to be there thinking, these people's lives are in the balance and nobody's listening to the law. The only people doing their job were the defence lawyers. So before I come to your case, Ayşe, if I can pop back to Ceren, if you don't mind, and then I'll ask you what you thought about Gezi. What about these women lawyers? Sidsel mentioned the anti-femicide, the platform case, which I'll also briefly mention. How are they doing this great job? Because the last trial I monitored a few weeks ago was they're trying to close down a platform that stops the killing of women. So it's a terrible thing to have to tell you, but over 300 women a year are killed in Turkey. It's between 1 and 5 a day. Since the first hearing, 78 more women had died. And it's thought to be the government has organised this group called Victims of Alimony, who are trying to take this platform of lawyers to court and shut them down by saying you've broken your own legislation, you may have court cases against you. The platform themselves comprise over 200 women, lawyers, who defend the families, defend the dead women, basically. They'll support the family throughout the whole trial and the whole process. So to be there and see 200 lawyers come from all over Turkey and be there in the courtroom while they were presenting this incredible defence, it's shocking to think that such a platform should be wanted to be shut down. They're saying that this platform are destroying the moral fabric of the family. So what we're faced with is really conservative views where they cannot admit. So how do these women, Ceren, keep fighting, and what do these lawyers do? There's a lot of women lawyers in Turkey, aren't there?
First, I think I will mention what we heard together in Amsterdam. Last week we had an event in Amsterdam together with Lawyers for Lawyers. We worked with them to analyze 2 different indictments, again, concerning freedom of speech in Turkey. And we invited 2 lawyers from Turkey. And one of them is the Secretary General of one of the biggest legal association in Turkey, Progressive Lawyers Association, that was shut down after the state of emergency. It's an association with 2,000 members, but it was closed because the government claimed that it is a terrorist organization. So 2,000 terrorist lawyers, and they also shut down the Kurdish Lawyers Association. So they also have around 2,000 lawyers, so 4,000 terrorist lawyers we have in Turkey. So this is interesting, but yeah. So the second, the Secretary General of this association, Ümit Büyükdağ, was together with us, and we heard from her. Of course, there are 2 things, in countries like Turkey, if you are always under the risk, if the autocracy is the authoritarian regime is everywhere, fighting against this regime is the only way to survive and is the only way to cope with the situation. Otherwise, it means that you accept what is happening around, and you will be depressed. B, it means that you will stay at home and you will have no chance to get back your freedom, etc. So we have no other option. We have to fight against it. Fighting against it means 2 different things. Fighting for your clients if you're a lawyer, but you always know that if you're a human rights lawyer, fighting for your clients means that fighting for your own freedom too, for your own rights too. So this is very important. But is it easy? This is one question. Our colleagues, our male colleagues, they are only dealing with the state, but unfortunately, even though we are working together, we are dealing with them too. And this is a problem. And we are also dealing with the judges and prosecutors in a different way than they are dealing with, because the judges and the prosecutors, this was very clear when Ümit was telling us, they think that we are not the ones who can remind them the law. This is not our position to criticize them. You feel it whenever you are in the court. Then you have to find a way to remind those males that you are equal subjects of this judicial process. And it is a double work, and it is unfair for us because, unfortunately, we are not that privileged with our colleagues who just go there and fight with them, shouting at them, etc. So, we are also resisting to this. I don't want to shout at someone using this method to convince them that I am a qualified lawyer. I can do it with my makeup. I can do it in a better way, using the scientific language, but this is a struggle. So there is an unfair situation going on, but as I said, to survive, we have to deal with it, and we are fighting for our own rights whenever we represent a client.
Yeah, I've remembered when you said Ümit was talking about that, because she said that the judge was actually told her he was hurt, that she'd argued so effectively against him, that she'd hurt his feelings. So, but you've hurt me. It's like, you're the judge, just make the right decision. I'll just come to Sidsel and then finally to you, Ayşe, about your Özgür Gündem time. So Sidsel, we've just talked about the Gezi Park. As I say, there's this issue of summary punishment in Turkey. They will arrest somebody, put them in prison, say there's a risk they'll run away, so they'll put them in prison, and then they will look for evidence, and then they will write the indictment. Then there will be a court case, and it may go on for years. So it's very unfair that they're in prison in the first place. When we were there, Agneta was there also. PEN Norway witnessed the verdict hearing in the Gezi trial on the 25th of April, and the 23rd it was on over the weekend. And they arrested all of our friends on the spot for 18 years in prison each, including Şebnem Korur-Fincancı, who's on the empty chair today. She's including Mücella Yapıcı, I beg your pardon, who's 72 years old. Osman Kavala had been in prison already for 5 years, even though the European Court had specifically said he should be freed. They found Turkey in breach of, they breached his right to liberty and security and also freedom of expression. And then Turkey just refused and refused. So there's a much bigger idea here of how Europe deals with Turkey and Turkey disobeys and all that. We won't discuss that right now, but you, Sidsel, you just met Osman Kavala, who's a very mild man. We've just interviewed him, so do look on the website for that. Every time he spoke, despite this awful injustice, locked up for nothing, he believes in the European Court, and each time he would just very eruditely and very, beautifully present his calm evidence, and he says, I believe in the rule of law, I believe in the European Court. So how did you met him just before he was arrested, didn't you, and interviewed him? How did you
I was also very lucky that my NRK sent me to cover the Gezi Park protest in 2013, so next year it will be 10 years ago, and all kinds of people were there. Also women with headscarves. I mean, all kinds of people were there. So this was the first big threat and challenge to Erdogan's power. But then a former minister of Norway, who's been dealing a lot with Osman Kavala because he was the minister, he was working with culture, told me, you must meet this Osman Kavala. You must meet him. So I thought, okay, I'll meet him. And then he was very, very impressive man, very impressive. When you meet him, you see that he is from a very classy family, very famous, old, high-class family, aristocratic. He speaks beautifully English. He is very sympathetic, mild. He is very well-educated, and also very modest man. So he is everything that Erdogan is not. And I think this is why he is in prison, because Erdogan just hates him, because it's personal for Erdogan. And he was a big threat because he had a lot of connections in Europe. He was working with, building bridges between Europe, EU, Turkey, between the Armenians and Turks, Armenians, Kurds, Kurds and Turks. So he is a big threat. But, when we had lunch together, we were discussing Gezi Park, because he was telling his office is very close to Gezi, just next to Gezi. Mm-hmm. So when the police started tear gassing the demonstrators, he opened the doors so sort of the people could come in and save themselves from the tear gas. So this was his, interaction with Gezi. He didn't organize it. He didn't pay for it. And later I interviewed one of the organizers behind Gezi. And, it was a very weird question to ask, but I asked him, did you get money from Osman Kavala? Of course they didn't. They came there to protect the trees. I just want to comment on one thing you mentioned. It's about the lawyers, because this January I interviewed one lady who was victim to domestic violence by her ex-husband. And the lawyer, İpek Bozkurt, she said that she is fighting all the time in the courts. And she said that the last years, Erdogan has changed the courts. It has become much more political. And that the court system is rigged to protect men and not protect women. So the men are getting lower and lower sentences. So the signal also with the Istanbul Convention to leave it is that for men it's okay to beat their women and to kill them. And also Canan Kaftancıoğlu, who is a politician in CHP, we talked with her about the Istanbul Convention, and she said that Turkey is run by men who are scared of women. They are afraid of women. So they are saying that women should stay at home. And also the reason for scrapping the Istanbul Convention is that it promotes gay rights, which is women's rights, which is a big threat to family values of Turkey. So this has been strengthened during the last 5 years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point. The Istanbul Convention they pulled out of on the 21st of March 2021. Was it already? Yeah,
last year.
Yeah, exactly. So Ayşe, you as a practicing woman journalist in Turkey, I mean, how are you feeling about that now? Can you write freely? Do you self-censor, or do you feel you can really speak your mind in your various columns?
I mean, I can write freely, but not because I'm not afraid of being punished, but I think it's okay to be punished. I mean, after I came out of prison, I was in prison for 5 months in 2 different prisons. Then I said, okay, this is something I can survive. So let me go. I would never say something bad about someone, something like an insulting thing. I'm not that personally, but I write anything I want. So if there's something you want to ask, go. It's okay. Yeah. One thing I want to say about Gezi, this is interesting because in Tahrir, the Tahrir in Egypt, Tahrir movement in Egypt, there were also these football groups, ultras. They were called, and I think this is a sign that in the new era, I don't mean also the new century, I'm not talking about a change in dates. In this new era, there are different subjects of change emerging in history. In Middle East, one of the, I normally try to call it the West Asia, because Middle East is the term of the colonialists. But in West Asia and also North Africa, there are new forces emerging. One of them is women. And we don't only see that in this part of the world. I'm not only talking about Iran. We are not seeing that only we can see that in Latin America and also Spain, countries like Spain. So one of them is women. These groups like the football supporters, they're also a new group. Because this is, I think, the era after the collapse of the Berlin Wall. So this is something else. So it is one thing. And I think one thing about Erdogan is he built up a new Turkey with neoliberal politics. And one thing is that, the second thing is that he wanted to take the wealth from one group, what we call the old money in Turkey, the secularist bourgeoisie, take the money from them and form his own bourgeoisie. Because without having a capital force behind you, it's very difficult to have a strong political career. It's very difficult to have a strong party. And Osman Kavala is, I think, a sign that because he has always been political, he has always been doing cultural things, and he was a good name to threaten these old money, to threaten these people like Koç, Sabancı, who are going into arts and they are secular and this thing, and they moved their money out of Turkey. This is one of the problems of this. You have probably read that we have very high rates of inflation, horrible. So the official one is 70%. The real one is 170%. Would you believe it? So you go to the market, buy something, the next week it is more expensive. So this is one thing. And my experience with Özgür Gündem is that I'm not Kurdish. I'm Turkish, and I'm what they call the white Turks, from the Aegean side. And I have never met the Kurds before I was 18 or something like that. And I'm not sure if I knew there were people like that in one part of the city, because I was really, this Western middle class young girl. Anyway, but now this newspaper is run by Kurds. It's part of the Kurdish press, but it's in Turkish. So it's writing things for people like me who don't speak Kurdish, who are Turks, and who want to learn. It is Kurdish because it is talking about the Kurdish reality, what is happening there, what's happening in the war, how they live, what they eat, what they think. And I started, because after I became a feminist in the 80s, then I noticed that you can't say all the humanity. You have to have separate movements, separate liberation movements. After I noticed that the woman can have a separate liberation movement, why not Kurds, I thought. And they were also emerging. This movement was emerging at that time. And in 2000s, I started writing in their newspapers as a columnist. And when this case, they had a campaign. You become some symbolic editor-in-chief, and this means that you have the legal responsibility. And would you join? They said, yes, I said. And I was one of the first that there was a case against, and I am the only one who went in prison for that. And they like to punish me because when someone like me is punished for something, for supporting the Kurds or solidarity with the Kurds, it means that, I mean, this is a woman around her middle age. She's Turkish, she's white. I mean, if they do that to her, they would think, what would they do to me if I support the Kurds? You know, this is a good threat. If you take into prison someone Kurdish, it's not they are Kurdish, they go in prison. A few weeks ago, 16 journalists were arrested. They would probably be, Kurdish journalists were arrested. They would probably spend time in prison longer than me, each of them. But nobody talks about them because they are young Kurds. But Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the head of CHP, he talked about me on TV and things like that. Everybody was, oh, poor woman. You know what I mean? Because I'm Turkish. That is because I'm Turkish. That's the only reason. So, and I thought it is a good thing to do because when they have the right of expression and the right of writing news. It's more than that. Then I have the right. I have the right to news and learn about what is happening in my country, and I have the right to write. So after these 5 months, I'm more brave. I think, okay, as I said before, this is something I can survive. It's okay to be among women in prison. It wasn't bad, really. So I think that is the whole story about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's shocking that you were the only one, in a way, who went to jail for that, because they were the empty chair, who is Şebnem Korurfincan, she has a case against her. But as you mentioned, the chilling effect is what they call it, isn't it? When one person is held up as an example and punished, it puts everybody else off. And as you say, if a symbol like yourself, it could happen to anybody, if you say that. So. So, Ceren, I'd like to ask you then, what about Jin News? So who are Jin News and what do they do? So yeah, can you tell us about them?
So I think this is a very interesting example of journalism. I'm trying to write my thesis about the way how they are understanding journalism. So because I think this is quite unique, and as far as I know, all around the world there is not one single similar example. This is a news agency. You know this better than me. So being a news agency is quite different than being a newspaper, because this gives you the right to distribute, to circulate the reportings. And all the mechanism, all the news agencies organized by females, including the accountant, driver, the cameraman, the reporters, etc. This is amazing. You know, they're trying to do everything all together, and they have a different approach of approach to the journalism, because they believe that this is very significant to deal with the everyday reflections of patriarchy when you are reporting. For instance, they never use surnames, because in Turkey, you know, before some judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, if a woman married, that woman had to get a surname of the husband. So in Turkey, in many other countries, using the surname was a very clear indicator of the patriarchy. So they never use surnames. They first mention, for instance, they're making an interview with you. First, in the first sentence, they mention your name and surname, and then when they go on writing about it, they go on with Caroline, so not with the surname. So this is a political position that they have. And they're trying to cover news concerning the ecological rights, children's rights, women's rights, etc. And the best thing that they're trying to do is not making victim stories, that I find amazing. You know, they're trying to focus on the strong woman figures. They are trying to underline that the woman who is the subject of violence is not the woman who is not strong. You know, this violence is not happening because the woman was victim, and they're changing the structure of the sentences, so which is again very important. They when they are reporting from the courts, they're also very careful about it. So I think this is very interesting. You know, we need one separate panel discussion about them, but I call it as an intersectional feminist. Like I think this can be called as an intersectional feminist approach in journalism. But honestly, I'm curious about how they are defining it. You know, because this is important. What they are thinking about it. This can put more values about it. Mm-hmm. So this is one example. But I just want to put one more thing. What Ayşe told about this Özgür Gündem case. I completely agree that your example was significant, and it is not like in Turkey. This always works like that. The white Turks, so-called, I have problems with this white adjective because, you know, according to whom, you know, I'm not coming from a middle-class family. I'm Turk, but I don't know whether this makes me white, and I'm in exile now, and so it gives me a status of a migrant. I don't know, like living in a great city in Vienna, but being this, you know, feeling the everyday life, let's not say racism, but discrimination. So this is subjective, but we know that we are the tool of oppression against Kurdish people in a way. Punishing us is targeting the other white democratic part of society, because telling them that, hey, you cannot support them. If you support them, then this is your place. Like, let's go to Bakırköy and Silivri and this and that. Yeah.
Ayşe, do you have something to add about the?
I want to say something about the news. I find them very interesting. Sometimes they interview, and I find their methods very interesting. And but don't think that this is the only. They are not feminists. They don't call themselves feminists. They don't agree with that. But there have been a lot of, and there is now a lot of feminist publication in Turkey. I mean, magazines, and now there are some websites. And also, I am part of that collective. We have a publishing house where we publish feminist books. So there is a lot of feminist publishing and journalism and going into Turkey. Have been in Turkey since the middle of 80s. But now, really they are different. The way they cover news and the way this surname thing. And they are Kurdish and also women. It's a different concept, I think.
Just one sentence. Yeah. I completely agree again. And also, you know, during the Ottoman period or the early Republican period, we had women magazines. We had women newspapers, like early Republican period and also in Ottoman period. For instance, there is, I think the first example is coming from the Armenian women who were living under the Ottoman Empire. The difference is really coming from being a news agency. All around the world, there are a lot of feminist magazines, but not news agency. And now, today, I think they couldn't still achieve their target, but having a news agency governed by the females mean that you have the power to distribute this voice and language and position. So this is the reason why I find them unique.
Yeah. Thank you. Sidsel, did you want to say something?
Yes, a little bit, and a question for the two of you. Because after Ottoman times, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk gave women lots of rights. I asked a Turkish lady last week. I said that we're going to talk about Turkish women in this panel, and I said, what should I say? And she said, you know, about rights. Atatürk gave us all the rights, but then Erdogan is trying to take those away again. So the question is, because Erdogan, during Erdogan's time in power, he has lifted the conservatives and the religious people up to the middle class. That's what I think. and given them more economic strength. But are those women, sort of the chic hijab women, you see they are, much richer now. You see them many places. And are they fighting for more rights? Because I saw when Turkey pulled out of the Istanbul Convention, I think it was the organization Kadın, where Erdogan's daughter is active. They said that they don't agree with this pulling out. So are these conservative women who are now in a better position in society, are they working for more rights? That's the question.
For one thing, as I said before, I'm not a historian, but from what I've read, there has been the first wave of feminism in Europe. Had also reflections in the Ottoman Empire, the last years of the Ottoman Empire, and also the first years of the Republic, and this was all talked about. So it's not like Mustafa Kemal giving the rights to women, but the Republic getting advice from women who have been active in the first wave of feminism in this part of the world. The Republic, of course, established some rights for women. But also other rights were established after the second wave of feminism. For example, before that, if a woman who is raped is proved to be a prostitute, sex worker, then the raper would get less punishment, less sentence. This law has changed. For example, you had to take your husband's surname, you couldn't work or have a business without the permission of your husband. There were laws like that. And the second wave of feminism, we changed all this by lobbying, by street work, and things like that. So I don't agree with that. But I have nothing to do with women in hijab. I mean, I have no problem with them. I have problem with the man who supporting the hijab or promoting the hijab, because they're not only promoting the hijab, they're promoting that I should be at home, I shouldn't be working, and I shouldn't have an active sexual life, or anything else, Turkey has been a secular country. Not in the sense that everybody was secular. There is a lot of religious groups, there are people believing, like everywhere on the world. I think people need religion. If this is like a choice for them, it's like a cure for them. It's not something between you, and it's a very social thing. But now Erdogan is trying to manage the country, to run the country, govern the country according to Sharia laws, which is something else. And it is also, I mean, there are a lot of discussions in Islam about all this. There are Islamic feminists. I'm not talking about women who call themselves I'm Islamic and also a feminist. There are really academics and the women in theology, working in theology about all this. This is also one reading of Islam. There are many people who say you don't have to cover your head. There are many women who say this having a wife younger than you is okay, but having a wife older than you is not okay, because Muhammad's first wife and the real love was a woman who was a widow and older than him. And why is not the Sunnat? Why is not this this is the Sharia? They are asking questions like that. But there was a few women who asked such questions. Gonca Kurish, one of them, maybe you heard of her, questions in Turkey, and she was killed very badly in a very bad way, by the Turkish Hizbullah. It's not like the Lebanese Hizbullah who are Shia. This is a Sunni one. This is a different one. So it is very difficult in Turkey for people to ask such questions, to think about Islam, to think about what it means. And this is something that Erdogan supports. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. You have to fear of God, you have to fear from God, do your jobs. Your husband or your father is the representative of God and the religious in your house. Mm-hmm. I mean, who would believe that normally? If you have faith, you wouldn't believe that. God, this is in Islam, it is between you and the God, yourself. This is a personal thing. Mm-hmm. So it is, I think, religion is a tool for making people to obey himself. Mm-hmm. I think that's all I've talked about.
Yeah. Can I make just a short addition? I think this is a very important question and somehow a misunderstanding, because Ayşe is right. One answer is related to history. And if you just go through it, you will see that in the early period of Republic, there were women associations that were shut down by the state. So, because there were Kurdish associations that were shut down. So, this is factually this is wrong, but when it comes to the law, philosophically and according to the law theory, it cannot be true, because the law is something that cannot be written by persons or ideologies without a conflict. It is shaped by the social conflict. There should be different powers. There should be some demands, and there are political moments. Just imagine, just remember when we had the republic in Turkey. It was almost the same period all around the world. All the empires were collapsed, and then the states started to come down. And Turkey made it, the Kemalist ideology made a choice, and they wanted to establish a modernist country. And all the other countries, they were trying to organize the right to vote for women, etc. So yes, they followed this, but we are talking about a woman movement. First wave woman movement started during the Ottoman period. So of course they had to cover this demand. Otherwise there will be a new conflict in a very young republic. Yeah. So they didn't want it. So I think we always need to think about law like that. Law is a battlefield, how our, the woman's body, this is a battlefield. Yeah. So this is the reason I also agree with Ayşe. We cannot talk about women with hijab. We can talk about males who are forcing them to use it, or who decide to ban them to use it, both sides.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of questions of education as well. I mean, to sort of bring this part of the panel to a close soon, and we'll ask for questions, but I want to go towards looking at the future and looking at this energy of the Women's March, for example. Thousands and thousands of women kettled into Istiklal Street. I'd also like to mention Hande Kadar. So it's not just women who are oppressed in Turkey. Trans women are the most oppressed, I would say, wouldn't you, of society. She was an activist who protested the ban on the Pride March, and she was brutally murdered horrifically. And she was a very strong campaigner. But what do you think there's a huge generational difference between somebody of Erdogan's stature and these teenage sort of girls who are feminists who are protesting on the streets with all this? They don't seem as though they will ever be defeated somehow, even though they're cordoned in and they're stopped. As soon as they opened the barricades, they just flooded down all over the motorway with all the banners, happy and laughing. So, is there great hope for the future of women in Turkey? And what would you have to say about that as a panel, starting with yourself?
Well, I think it's, as I said before, the women are one of the subjects of democratic change on the world. So this is a sign of that. And I think when I've been to those marches, of course, and it is like you go to the march and after the march, you have been changed. I remember at one of the demonstrations, the police put some cars on the street so that people couldn't walk between them. It's to sort of block the street. And all these girls, they came there and they walk on the cars. I mean, it's something very difficult to do. They probably, during any other day, if you say to them, okay, just climb to this car, you can't climb a car, but there you can. It gives you power. What gives you power is that this being together and really demanding, and the democratic ways it has been organized. You can carry anything, any slogan. If it is not only against women, you can carry anything you want. And there's not all these long speeches, and there's music. There's no stage where people talk. The music is in the demonstration, so it's different. It's really different. And you go there, okay, it gives you a feeling. You leave the place, not like in another demonstration. In another demonstration, you say, okay, let's go there and see friends, and this is nice. Okay, how is it, the crowd? And it's not like that there. It is a different thing. This is like that with the women's demonstrations and also with the pride demonstrations in Turkey. I have been also to pride demonstrations, also the one
which
that
have been banned since 2017.
Yes, and they do everything. The trans women are one of the groups, especially the women, because the trans men, they are they can camouflage themselves more, I think. There's one reason for that. And also, of course, there's this thing that if a woman wants to be a man, the best thing on the world, I mean, then it's so nice, you know. I mean, you want to, but a man, I mean, giving up his masculinity. I mean, you have been born a man. How can you do that to yourself and become a woman? It's so, you know, we all know that they are so very nice, the man. Okay, so they think this way, and the trans women, they are really trying to get rid of them. They are trying to get all the LGBT people in Turkey. They are trying to. It is like they want to. It's like an ethnical cleaning thing. But with women, it is different. They don't want to get rid of women. They want the woman to obey themselves. The man. It's two different things, I think. These are two different things. That is one thing, and I think this is a very important power. Also, we see in Iran, but also we need some united. Political group, political force to change the government. To change, and this is not like all these old-fashioned parties, you know, making speeches on TV and boring things and discussing all these macho guys. This is something else. We need something else. I don't know how it is done. I don't know, and it's not an easy thing, but this is a problem in all the world. This is a problem. You are living in a nicer country, I think. Things seem to be easier here, but I'm not sure. I mean, we need that we need change in all the world. I don't want to say the word revolution because I know that when you say revolution, everybody's, you know, it is like so uncomfortable. No, revolution is something people who are older than 50 talk about. The young people talk about change. Okay, let's talk about change, how we can do it. But I see these teenagers interested in politics, in all sections of politics. The right-wing politics, there are also teenager boys who think they should fuck all the young girls and they should kill all the Kurds, and the Armenians have bad blood, they are racists, they are sexist, they are very bad guys. So you see this thing everywhere, in every political scene. But I think I am hopeful for Turkey. I'm hopeful for the world, not in the sense that there will be elections and we can get rid of Erdogan, because we get rid of Erdogan, another one might come in. But we have the power and the mind. I don't only believe in courage. Courage is something, but if you're not clever enough, it doesn't mean anything, courage. So I think it is very important to be, you know, have a clear mind, and I think I am hopeful. Thank you for listening. I talked too much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sidsel, what would you have to say on that, the future for women in Turkey?
I think that the very brave women of the Femicide platform, they will not give up. Their slogan is, we are not scared, we will not be silent, we don't want to be killed. And I think that what we see in Iran gives a lot of inspiration and strength to women also in Turkey. But again, I think that everybody is a bit nervous about the next election. What will happen if Erdogan continues, if he steals the election? It will be more difficult maybe for women, but if Erdogan actually loses and he acknowledges the defeat, which I am not so sure he will do, but if he will step down, I think it will be easier for women. Mm-hmm. But I believe in the Turkish women, I really do. I have seen their strength.
Good. Yeah, good. And Ceren, what would you say? Thank you.
First, yeah, I am also hopeful because first in Turkey, 2016 was not our first coup attempt. In our history, we had several moments, unfortunately. And if we check the history, we may find 3-4 years without a social movement. In Turkey, the oppression was there, but always the resistance existed too. So always. This is a different kind of knowledge for the society. So I think people know, that they can create different ways of resistance, and this is the first reason why I'm hopeful. The second one is, again, very connected with Gezi protests. Those people who were there, they are still living in Turkey. they are there, and they have the same demands, maybe more. They are more aware of what is happening around. And now they are in a better mode because maybe some of them before the Gezi, they had no idea what was happening in the Kurdish region of Turkey, but they learned how the state television was manipulating what was happening in Gezi. They learned it by their own experiences. So this is easy to explain them. They start to question because they became the target. They became the target by the government and the politicians and everybody. So I think this is important, you know. And the third thing is, of course, the women and LGBTQ movement. In 2017, I really remember this. Like, you will also remember that the slogan was "Birlikte güçlü," means we are strong together. And I saw the photo from Istiklal, millions of women. They were holding this pancards. And it was amazing. And at the same moment, every single day, there was a protest in Ankara, Yüksel Street. There were women there who were beaten by police daily. Mm-hmm. They were dismissed academics and teachers and public officers. Every next day, they were going there again. And this went on, I don't know, more than 1 year maybe. Really? So. Yes. Females, you know, women, they did it. And this is something, last word, I am hopeful because every 8th of March I will not give you a lot of details about the person because I don't want her to be identified, but I call some of my friends from different professions because this is a tradition between us. We celebrate our 8th of March, even though it is a day for resistance in Turkey. We like to celebrate each other, and one of them is a doctor. Every time I call her one day before because I know that on the 8th of March she will be in the medical aid system during the demonstration. She will not be able to answer me because she will help the protesters who are beaten or who are tortured, etc. I will call my lawyer friends one day before because they will be a part of the legal aid system who will be in the prison, like in the police stations, etc. So this is the strongest reason of the hope. People are fighting there and trying to do their best. So we have to focus on the positive aspects because something is still going on. And, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. And just before we go to the questions, we'd love to have whatever your questions are, please do ask. Questions rather than comments, but then if we have time at the end, you're welcome to make a few comments too. The Saturday Mothers we should mention before we finish really. Cumartesi Anneleri, they've been meeting for over 30 years now, and they are calling for their disappeared family members. So they take photographs of them and they would just sit peacefully. There would be occasional speeches from members of families, and they just want their disappeared daughters, sons and family members back. And they've been prevented in the last couple of years from meeting in their usual place. There's now a court case, and it gets violent even at those court cases. So yeah, good. You know, I too believe also very strongly in the power of women in Turkey of all ages. So can we have now a couple of questions from the audience, if you like? Over there. Yeah, there's a lady just over there. Thank you. Good evening. Hi.
Good evening. Thank you for a very rich discussion. I really enjoyed it. My name is Pinar Tank and I'm a researcher on Turkey. My question to you is, as you know, Turkey is a very polarized society. And is the women's movement polarized in the same way? And I'd like to follow up on what Sidsel said. To what extent do you try and reach across the divide, not just recognizing their right to either wear or not wear a headscarf, but actually working with them on issues like femicide, which is, you know, across the board a problem for women? Thank you.
So who would like to answer first? Do you want to go first, Sidsel, as that was the end of the question, and then we'll ask about polarisation within the movement?
I think Ayşe and Ceren should answer.
Go first. Okay. So is the women's movement polarised? Polarised in what way exactly do you mean?
The secular divide, the secular religious divide. You know, when you're talking, these are the sort of terms that we're using, the Erdogan supporters and the Kadems, and on the other side, the secular women's movement.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we've made such a big distinction ourselves in what we've been saying, but I mean, would you say that there is separate factions within the feminist movement, perhaps, or polarization?
There are sections in the feminist movement, and it is very good that all these small groups of women can work together, can act together. So it's not. I don't agree that Turkey is a polarized country. This is a way of reading what is going on. Turkey is not a polarized country. Turkey is an angry country. That is something else. And this anger became with this frustration. I've been living in this country for, as a grown-up, for more than 40 years, as a grown-up. And I've never seen such frustration in my life. Even during the 70s, where everything was very difficult, there was a civil war in the country. There is much frustration. This is called by some people polarization. I don't agree with that. I mean, for one thing, the country is becoming more political because of Erdogan. People who would never be interested in politics, thanks to him, people are interested in politics now because what happens in the parliament, what doesn't happen in the parliament, affects their own lives. In terms of insecurity, in terms of economical insecurity, in terms of other things. This is one thing. And I have been part of this groups who have supported women who acted against the ban of hijab in schools. But now we are in a different state. That was something tactical. At that time, because it was banned, I moved for them. But now it is not banned; it is promoted. I mean, in many places, in many reasons, especially in public sphere, it is better to have a hijab. So people wear hijab. I mean, there was one woman she was the wife of a politician from AKP, and she started wearing the hijab when he was chosen something, he was elected something, and then when he lost his post, she dropped wearing the hijab. She gave up wearing the hijab. This is a tool to polarize us, I think, for one thing, and I believe that the right to live. I don't agree with the word femicide, as I said before, because femicide, I think this femicide thing, they are not trying to get rid of all the women. They are trying to make us obey. And if all the women who have been killed are the women who resist. And all around the world, if you resist in anything, you get violence against you. They are always the women who want to divorce, who want to break up the relationship. They're always, the boyfriend says, no, we will go on. You won't leave me, the boyfriend says. He might have another girlfriend. That's okay. But this is something that these women are killed because they are resisted. They don't obey. So that's another discussion. But the women's movement is secular. Should it be religious? I mean, it is a secular, but there are many Islamic women, there are many women who have faith there, who have hijab there, who cover their heads there. There are many women like that. But agenda is different. We are not talking about any demand by any woman. We are talking about this is a movement of women's liberation, not anything about women. Because I know I can see that there are many women who will say, I'm just fantasizing, but okay, let's make up be free for all women. Someone can demand that. This is not a woman's demand. We are talking about liberation. We are talking about freedom. We are talking about emancipation. So it is not just a woman's movement. The name is, if you don't call it the feminist movement, then all around the world, it is called Women's Liberation Movement. So.
Just probably two sentences, and I do not know whether Ayşe will agree with me or not. I don't believe that there is one single feminism all around the world. It is not only about Turkey. There are different feminisms, and and of course, yes, in Turkey we have different feminisms. We are coming together for the women's rights. We know how to work together for the women's rights, but probably about the future, about the financial issues, about how to be ruled, etc. We have different positions because there are different feminisms. This is one thing. And the second thing is there is one other reading about Turkey, for instance. I might make mistake. I don't remember whether it was 2017 or 2018. But after one of the 8th of March, the discourse of the government against the women movement, women and LGBTQ movement, became harder. Because this time, women with so-called hijab, they were also very visible during the demonstrations. Very visible. They were there together with all the other women. And I also don't like the term of secularism, sorry, but like this is a different discussion. And then the AKP started to attack not just the woman, but the term of feminism, because they were losing their own people there. And then feminism became, once again, the enemy of the society and the moral issue, like the family and this and that. Because this time, like when a journalist took a photo, it was impossible to avoid the woman with hijab. They were there. So, I don't know, like the important thing is being able to come together for the woman and LGBTQ rights. And the other parts, we will fight together if it is necessary in a democratic way, you know, because we don't have to agree about everything just because we are women and we are demonstrating together.
Yeah, thank you. And Sidsel, do you think that answered the question that you were being asked as well there?
I think you are more qualified and give more interesting answers than me. Yeah, I leave it to you.
Yeah, I think you covered that question. Is there another question from the floor?
Well, if not, I think it's one more question and then we'll end the session.
Is there one more? Oh, there is a gentleman coming now. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to ask you about your opinions about the last victim of Erdogan's way of ruling. She was arrested last night. She is said to be from YPG, from Kobane, crossing the border, traveling into Istiklal and Istanbul. And Erdogan had her story ready a couple of hours after she was taken, which we know from before, from 2015 especially, another situation where we've seen that he almost had the story before the event is happening. So I think she's, for me, being a feminist, you know, it's not only supporting women, but it's also being deeply critical against all authoritarian regimes and patriarchal way of ruling. Okay. And so I just want a short reply on what you think about this.
Did I misunderstand you? Are you trying to teach us how to be a feminist?
No. Okay. I'll just say how I am a feminist.
Okay.
And I have her picture here, so you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen that too. Okay, thank you for that. She could be a man. I agree with you with the setup thing. I agree with you, but this is not about being a woman. That person could be a man. That person could be a Kurd. That person could be a Turk. This is something else. I think. This is not that I don't agree with that, but I'm not sure that this is a focusing point about feminism. We have to work on that as men too. You have to take responsibility for that. Because she's a woman, this doesn't mean that, don't expect everything from feminists. Don't expect everything from feminists. Some things are things, you are living here probably. I will go back to Turkey, and maybe you can do something about that. Don't give me a responsibility for everything as a feminist living in Turkey, okay?
Yeah, I would say on top of that we deliberately did not. This is the biggest news to come out of Turkey in the last few days, obviously. We deliberately did not begin with that, and we have not made a statement as PEN Norway because the facts were unknown. The facts were completely unknown to begin with, and we do know that such things can be very much manipulated in a time of election. It does appear that the PKK have said that they are not responsible in any way. They have denounced the crime, and they have taken pity with everybody who was a victim there. So that is as much as we know, and it's a topic that we're not, as a freedom of expression organisation, prepared to make a political statement upon. And I think Ayşe answered it pretty well as well. So, but thank you all very much indeed for your questions and for your attendance. It's been wonderful.
And on behalf of PEN Norway, thank you so much for our great panel. We are going to give you the book of Ilham Schumacher that Caroline has edited and translated many of the poems. And well, since you did the work, Caroline, you're going to get something else. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Ilhan Çomak, if you would like to look him up online and buy the book, perhaps. He's been in prison for 28 years and has published 9 books of beautiful poetry, all about nature, the outside. He's a honorary member of PEN Norway and won the Freedom of Expression Prize of the Norwegian Writers' Union this year. So Ilhan Sami Çomak, please look him up. And thank you very much indeed.